ladies and gentlemen, good evening, hello. Wow. Thank you so much for coming. This is great. I'm so happy you're here. I've got a great show for you. I've got a song to sing at the top of the show. I sang it for my uncle by Zoom a few weeks ago. He listened to it. He said, "Who's your audience?" I said, "My patients." He said, "Do you like your patients?" I said, "Very much." He said, "Don't sing that song." So I don't have a song for you at the top of the show, but it's okay. I've got a great show for you. Let's get started. This is the question I'm going to answer for you tonight. What should we eat? If you had asked this question 3,000 years ago, the answer would have been, that's an idiotic question. Just eat food. All the food you can, whatever you can find, it's all good. That's why they call it food. That would have been the answer. And that was true. For 57 million years, almost to this very day, food was our ineluctable ally in health. 128 years ago, in 1895, all that changed when two brothers in Battle Creek, Michigan, invented this, Kellogg's Corn Flakes. And it marked the onslaught of processed, industrialized food in the United States and around the world, culminating in 1957 with the apotheosis of processed food, high fructose corn syrup. It was a disaster. In 1850, the death rate from heart disease was less than 1%. 100 years later, it was 40%. An absolute catastrophe in the United States and around the world. Food wasn't the only thing that marked that change. There were a couple other players as well. Sean Connery, as usual, was at fault. And the incidence of smoking skyrocketed. This reflects, of course, a sedentary lifestyle. That was new in the 20th century, wasn't it? Smoking was a trivial part of the population in 1900. By 1960, 40% of adults smoked. But food, with those two other big changes in how we live, marked a catastrophic change in our health care. So, what do we do about it? I'm going to tell you tonight, and I'm going to sum up where I'm going with this right now, and then we'll dive into the details. I'm going to argue two things for you tonight. One, we need to eat a lot more plants, 4 times what we're eating now. And two, don't worry about getting enough protein. I think those ideas relate to each other, because I think what's going on is, you and I grew up thinking we need a lot of protein. We need chicken salad sandwiches for lunch. We need turkey or roast beef or fish or meatballs for dinner. And when we're done eating that stuff, we've got room to eat plants, but not much. We're just about done. And it's a myth that we need as much protein as people think we do. And we'll talk about that. So let's start with where we are. Let's start with our current understanding that I'll summarize for you in 30 seconds. We think we need to limit fat, and we need to really limit carbs, right? Because carbs are bad for us, they turn to fat. And we need a lot more protein than we're getting. That's the zeitgeist, that's the spirit of the age, that's our consensus, our current understanding of what's going on with food. And all three of those ideas, ladies and gentlemen, are wrong. Which begs the question, what the heck is going on with nutrition? Why is this so controversial and difficult? Why is it that every 5 years we're hearing something completely different from what we heard before? That alcohol you're drinking, 1 or 2 drinks, is actually good for you. No, wait a minute, we made a mistake, it's all bad for you. Don't drink any alcohol. What is the problem? Let me show you. I want to ask this half of the room, 50 people, and let's pretend it's 5,000, okay? For the next 10 years, will you people please eat a whole food plant-based diet? Just that. Now you folks over here, I want you 5,000 people, I want you to go to McDonald's and eat a standard American diet. You're welcome. For the next 10 years, And we're going to follow you. And I've just designed a brilliant interventional study. What's so smart about it? I've randomized all the confounding factors. Some of you smoke, some of you don't, some of you sleep well, some don't, some drink alcohol, some don't, some have hypertension or high cholesterol or diabetes, some don't. It's all fine because it's evenly spread among the population. The only thing I've done is that one intervention. I have you folks eating a whole food plant-based diet and you folks eating a standard American diet, and we'll get to see 10 years from now what the consequences are. What's the problem with my plan? None of you will do what I asked you to do. None of you. Nobody. It's too big a request. It can't be done. Nutritionists understand this. So instead of doing what I just proposed, that would work really well, instead, what we have to do is say, okay, look, would you folks who eat a whole food diet, raise your hand and then go over there and sign up over there, please. And you folks who eat a standard American diet, wherever you are, would you raise your hand, go over there and sign up over there. And we're just going to follow you for the next decade. We're going to see how you do. That's not going to work nearly as well, is it? Because now I'm choosing people who have chosen those diets. And what goes with a whole food plant-based diet? All kinds of things. Exercise, a good night's sleep, not too much alcohol. They're definitely not smoking. They're jogging up and down the street 3 times a week. And what about those standard American diet people? What are they up to? Well, they're a lot more likely to be on the front porch, firing up the grill, having a couple of smokes, maybe some beer, make some burgers, and they're laughing at the whole food plant-based people running up and down the street. The whole food people will live a lot longer, but we don't know why, do we? How much of it had to do with that diet and how much of it had to do with all those other confounding factors that get in the way of making a clean judgment. That's the problem with nutrition as a science. Food is so complex, and you just, unlike a pill and a placebo, you can't just say, do this for 5 years and we'll let you know if it works. It can't be done. You have to do what are called observational studies. And they're a mess. So what do? We do the best we can. But I'm going to ask you as well as looking at the evidence we have and drawing what conclusions we can, I'm going to ask you, knowing how difficult it is to reach valid conclusions, that you, ladies and gentlemen, trust your judgment. Trust your common sense. 3 times tonight I'm going to ask you to do that. Now, we just got done saying we currently understand that we should limit fat because too much is not good for us. Really limit carbs because that's not too good for us. Only protein of the 3 macronutrients that make up food is really good for us. That's what we all think is so. If that were so, and here's the first instance where I'm going to ask you to apply your judgment and your common sense. Let me propose this hypothetical scenario to you. Suppose you got 3 hunter-gatherers running around back in the day. And one of them says, well, I like protein and carbs, but fat, that's not good for me. I can't eat fat. And the second hunter-gatherer says, well, I like protein and fat, but carbs, those are bad for me. And the third hunter-gatherer says, I'm good to go with all 3 macronutrients that make up food. Here's my question. Whose progeny will walk the earth 1 billion years hence? It's gonna be this guy, right? Ladies and gentlemen, it's not unlikely. It's impossible that any of the 3 macronutrients that make up food could be bad for us. We wouldn't be here. A species that thrived on all 3 would have taken over. That said, let's go into the details, just a little bit about fat, a little bit about carbs, and then I'm going to spend about 20 minutes with you on protein, because that's where the real fight is. And I've got a hell of a story to tell you about. Let's just spend 2 minutes on fat. Here's all I want to say about fat, one of those 3 macronutrients. We don't have to talk about trans fat, those have been banned. The controversy is with saturated fat. And all I want to say about that, saturated fat is fat that's typically solid at room temperature, like butter, right? I want you to know half the fat in breast milk is saturated fat. And I don't think it's possible that mothers, in the interest of giving their children nutrition, are also causing heart disease. Only other thing I want to say about fat for the moment is regarding unsaturated fat. You folks know that Unsaturated fat are usually liquid at room temperature, olive oil, things like that. And omega-3 fatty acids are a subset of unsaturated fat found in fish that's really good for us. We know that, right? That is true. Fish has essential fatty acids like EPA, good for your heart, and DHA, really good for your brain, preventing dementia. And that's true. Eat fish, and that's good for you. Almost none of us in this room are getting enough omega-3 fatty acids. There's a big imbalance between omega-3 and omega-6 in Western culture. It's about a 14-to-1 ratio, 6 to 3. Hunter-gatherers, it was 2 to 1. They ate way less vegetable oil, because it didn't exist, and they ate a lot of fish. And we need to eat more fish. That's good for us. But what I want to say about fat is you don't have to get your omega-3 from fish. You can also get it from chia and flax seeds. This alpha-linolenic acid, this essential fatty acid, does convert to EPA and DHA when you don't have enough of it. The dogma is that's not true. Well, the dogma is wrong. It is true. And chia and flax seeds are really, really good for us. Flax seeds you need ground up, chia seeds you don't. Throw it on anything, yogurt, a salad, whatever you like. A teaspoon to a tablespoon of either of those or both of those every day is so good for us. Eat more chia and flax seeds. That's all I want to say about fat, okay? Let's go on to carbs, just for a couple of minutes. Oh, wait. Good. Let me do that again. When you go to Market Basket, don't forget, pick up your caviar, because as Zsa Gabor reminds us, when you think caviar, think Market Basket. Thank you, Zsa. It's one of my dumb jokes. I had to go back and do that. Okay. All right, so that's all I want to say about fat. What about carbs? Wow, these carbs have been demonized, haven't they? I mean, don't we hear all the time, oh, watch your carbs, look out for, you're going to eat all those carbs? Yikes. Take it easy on those carbs. Wow, carbs have a bad rap. Let's talk about that. What happened? Why do carbs have such a miserable reputation? Here's what happened. In the 1970s, the USDA, the current thinking goes, said, oh, listen, saturated fat is bad for us. Instead, eat carbs. And everybody did. And what happened? We all got obese and diabetic. That's what happened. Everybody understands. Carbs cause all kinds of problems. But that's not really what happened. What actually happened is, in the 1970s, the USDA told us to limit saturated fat and instead eat whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and legumes. And what did we Americans do between 1970 and 2010? We did the exact opposite of what we were asked to do. Here's the light in 1970, the dark in 2010. Fruit, vegetables, and legumes remained a trivial part of our diet. And everything they wanted us to stop eating, processed food, whole and saturated fat, sweetened products, all those things increased over that 40-year period. That's why obesity and diabetes took off. And ever since then, what nutritionists have been arguing about is which is worse for us, saturated fat or carbs? We're asking the wrong question. That's not the question we should be asking. We have, call it 130 years of catastrophic food, preceded by 57 million years of healthy food. Let's step out of this box that we're in. Let's look behind us. Let's turn around, look back, and ask, what did these people eat? What did our ancestors and their ancestors, primates, eat? Because they did great. So let's just eat what they eat. That should work. I think that's true. So what they eat? Primates ate plants overwhelmingly and a little bit of meat. And most of their protein came from insects. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that's what they ate. Okay, then what happened? That was 57 million years ago, the dawn of primates. About 2.5 years ago, early humans come on the scene. And as you know, we developed the ability to use tools and to organize. So we could start to hunt and kill animals and get meat into our diet. And we did. And for a lot of hunter-gatherers, if not most, meat became the predominant part of the diet. Then, 1.8 million years ago, along comes the smartest man who ever lived. His name was Fred, known to his friends as Smarty Pants, and what did he discover? How to control fire. This was huge, because now, for the first time, we, alone among all animals, had the ability to harvest and digest underground storage organs, starchy carbohydrates, root vegetables, potatoes, rich in starchy carbs. Carbohydrates, ladies and gentlemen, carbohydrates bought us our big brains. Over the next million years after we discovered fire and could start eating that food, our brain volume doubled. These foods, predominantly carbohydrates, fruit, vegetables, and legumes, are the healthiest foods we can eat. They prevent heart disease, cancer, dementia, and diabetes. So now you can see, if you go back to this graph, what really happened is we betrayed our heritage. We turned our back on our ancestors. We stopped eating plants. I know what you're thinking. They didn't just eat plants, they ate meat. Look, we eat meat, they ate meat. You're right, they did. I'm going to get to that. That's the elephant in the room. I am going to talk about meat. All I want to point out at the moment is we stopped eating plants. Our intake has been trivial. And hunter-gatherers ate 10 times the amount of plants we eat every day. That's assuming their plant intake was only 30% of their total intake of calories. If we were to quadruple our plant intake, we still wouldn't be there, but we'd be in a much healthier place. We stopped eating plants. That's what really happened. And by the way, when we talk about plants, I'm talking about those things that grow on the ground. Which of those is not a plant? That's right, bread is not a plant. It comes from a plant, but it's not a plant. So how much of this stuff are we supposed to eat? I'm 210 pounds. I should eat 10 tennis balls a day. Thus the title of my show. If you're 130 pounds, you should eat 6. That would work out. Raw vegetables. Make any one of these tennis balls 2 tablespoons of nuts or seeds and consider that a tennis ball, and you're good to go. Any way you look at it, what I'm really suggesting is that we all should be eating far more plants than we're eating. And here's what I think you think is the problem with that. If we do that, we're not going to get the protein we need. Seriously, we all grew up understanding that. Lunch and dinner is an entree and a side of vegetables. That's what it is. You know, chicken salad sandwich for lunch, whatever for dinner, something that involves predominantly protein. And we can't gobble down all those plants if we're also eating protein in that amount. It won't work. We'll be eating till we'll be full. You'll never get through it. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how much protein we really need and how much protein we're really eating. Because this, I think, is the heart of the problem. It's the real fight. It's a huge fight that we're going to get to. I'm going to tell you about the beginning and the end of that battle. But it, I think, is the most important part of what's going on in nutrition today. Everybody's conception about how much protein we actually need. So let's talk about that. First of all, protein, as you know, is often described in grams. Oh, you need 200 grams a day. You need a gram per pound of protein a day. You need 50, 100 grams a day. What the heck is a gram of protein? What is that? Here's 90 grams of protein, okay? That's the food on the plate weighs more than 90 grams, but the protein in that food is 90 grams. There it is, 2.5 pieces of whole wheat bread, a bowl of plain yogurt, a very sad-looking piece of chicken, 2 eggs, and some kidney beans and some nuts. That's it. That's 90 grams more than we need every day, as you will see. We're all getting more than that every day. But that's it. That's what 90 grams looks like. So, how much do we actually eat? We eat a little bit more than that. Americans on average eat 100 grams of protein a day. We eat more than almost anyone in the world. We eat far more beef than anyone in the world. All right, that's it. Knowing we're at the top, hooray, USA, we are number 1. How much do we need? Here's where the battle really is. And it's a 150-year story. And I'm only going to tell you about the very beginning and the very end, where we are today. I want you to know about what the controversy is today. But I want you to know, the beginning of the story is so shocking. I want you to know that's recapitulated during the course of the battle over protein over the last 125 years. Here's the beginning of the story. About 40 years after protein was discovered, it was the first macronutrient discovered, this man, Carl von Voigt, a German researcher, looked at his buddies, German laborers, and they were eating about 118 grams a day. And they looked great. And von Voigt said, hey, we should all do that. Wilbur Atwater, the father of nutrition in the United States, said, okay, that sounds good. And we were off and running. There was a universal consensus that this is how much protein we should take. It was just completely accepted. There was a moral component to this. It was understood that leading countries in the world, like the United States, were leading countries because we ate a lot of protein. And conversely, loser countries like Italy, they were degenerate because they did not eat enough protein. There was a moral dimension to this. It was just completely understood. You've got to eat protein if you're going to be healthy and if you're going to be a good person. That's what everybody knew to be true. Into that environment came this man, Russell Henry Chittenden, R.H. Chittenden. He was studied at Yale, graduated there, and then did research there. And Chittenden was skeptical that we needed that much protein because he had done experiments and understood that our obligatory loss of protein was low. Here's what I mean by that. You and I can store as much fat as we want right here, right? And we can also store a lot of carbohydrates in our liver as glycogen and in our muscles as glycogen. But we can't store protein. So it would make sense, wouldn't it? Think about that. If hunter-gatherers who had to catch their protein, because their protein ran away, didn't it? They had to go periods of time without any protein at all. They wouldn't have made it if they couldn't conserve the protein they had. And they could. Chittenden was aware that our obligatory loss of protein, how much protein we lose every day no matter what, was very low. It was about 24 grams a day. And so he was skeptical that we needed as much protein as these other researchers said we did, because we are so good at conserving the protein we have. We are superb at that. Chittenden ran 3 experiments, one with sedentary people like him, one with athletes who wanted to build muscle, one with soldiers who wanted to build muscle. He put them all on 56 grams of protein a day for 6 months. Less than half what von Voigt and Atwater recommended. And what did they do? They did great. The sedentary people didn't lose any protein. The athletes and the soldiers both built muscle mass. They all did great. It was a stunning conclusion, just a stunning development. Chittenden published his work, and what was the response by the world? It was outrage. It's Chittenden against the world, said one. It's inconceivable that all mankind should have fallen into the same mistake, and only Russell Henry Chittenden was right. Well, he was right. It took 60 years, but he was vindicated by the USDA, 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. And let me show you the data on that. Chittenden had said, we need 0.75 grams per kilogram per day, call it 0.85 to be safe, he said. USDA in the 1970s said 0.8 grams per kilogram. A 2003 meta-analysis said 0.83 grams per kilogram. He was exactly right. He got it exactly right. And it took decades before he was vindicated. This happened again and again in the 20th century. In the 1950s with a disease called kwashiorkor, and at the turn of the century with a new method of measuring protein turnover called the indicator amino acid oxidation method. I will spare you that. I want to go to the end of the story, where we are today, because I want you to know what the controversy is about now. You ever hear that, sarcopenia? Anybody know what that is? That describes the loss of muscle as we age. Sarcopenia describes the loss of muscle as we age. Why does that happen? After you and I get to about age 40, We have reduced production of growth hormone, testosterone, and estrogen, all really important in promoting muscle synthesis. So if we do nothing else about it, we lose muscle mass as we age. That's sarcopenia. It's part of getting older. If you had sarcopenia in 2015, someone would have said, yeah, that's part of getting older. But if you had sarcopenia in 2016, guess what? Now you have a disease that I can bill for and that they're working on developing drugs for. I'm not making this up. Sarcopenia is now a disease. I'm waiting for age 65 to be a disease. Then I can bill for that too. You just come over on your birthday and we'll both cry about it. Unfreaking believable. What causes sarcopenia? Getting old, that helps. Being very inactive. Severe malnutrition will do it. And get this is interesting. Insulin resistance and being overweight or obese, that helps promote sarcopenia. Here's what's ironic about that. Eat enough meat, and that will actually promote muscle loss, not muscle gain. See how that would work? So what's this got to do with protein? The argument goes like this. Muscle's made of protein. To preserve muscle and prevent sarcopenia, you should eat more protein. And ladies and gentlemen, this young man is not alone. He just described the consensus of the medical scientific community today. This is a hugely popular point of view. Attia, is that the name of the guy out there? Yeah, wonderful book I just read by Peter Attia. Yeah, called Outlive. Great book. I'll be stealing all his advice about exercise in a talk I give 2 years from now about that. He advised we take 2.2 grams per kilogram of protein a day, a shocking amount of protein. This is a really popular view. And here's all I'd say. This is going to be the second time tonight I'm asking you to apply your common sense. Remember we agreed early on in my talk that nutrition is so screwed up, we ought to trust our judgment. We ought to retain our skepticism if something doesn't make sense. And we ought to apply common sense when we can. Here's a common sense question for you. If sarcopenia is about not getting enough protein, then it ought to be true, shouldn't it, that the country with the highest protein intake would have less sarcopenia than the country with the lowest protein intake. Does that resonate with you folks? So, do we know that? Do we have that data? Which country? Oh, we do. Here we are. Hooray for us, USA and Canada, #1. We have the highest protein intake of all those countries listed. Yippee. Good for us. And here, way at the other end, is India, with just about half our protein intake, 55 grams a day compared to our 90 to 100 grams a day. Okay. India ought to have a hell of a problem with sarcopenia, shouldn't they? Compared to us. I'm just saying, compared to us. So has anybody measured that? Has anybody studied that? You're all familiar with the International Working Group on Sarcopenia. I know we all read that journal. They actually do this stuff. And there it is, 17% in the United States. And there's India, 17%, same level. Actually, that's not true. Rural India, the prevalence of sarcopenia is 14.1%. They have less sarcopenia than we do in the United States. Remember, they're taking about half our daily protein intake. What's going on with that? The answer to that question can be found with the ad campaign for the son of the late Senator Robert F. Kennedy. Here he is showing us why we should vote for him, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for president. Take a look at this. And, you know, he's making a hell of an argument. If the next president has to move his own stuff into the White House, we got to vote for this guy. He looks great. He's 69 years old. Phenomenal. Really impressive. But what this really is an excellent argument for how to prevent sarcopenia. Exercise is how you prevent sarcopenia. That's how you preserve muscle. Another common sense argument for you. Ladies and gentlemen, we eat more protein than just about anyone in the world. If we are protein deficient, then the whole rest of the world has to be catabolic. They've got to be harvesting their own organs to get the protein they need. It would be a global medical catastrophe. That's not happening. Last common sense argument for you about protein. This is really worth talking about. What do babies need? Here's why I'm interested in this. You know how we're sitting around wondering what we ought to eat? Nobody knows. That's why I'm here tonight. We don't have to wonder that for babies. Why? Because nature designed their food, didn't it? Babies get breast milk. We know exactly what babies need. And those little brats in their first year of life are tripling in size and growing 10 inches. Wow! I can't even imagine how much protein they must need. We'll never do that again in our lives. Not even close. So, how much protein is in breast milk? Wouldn't that be a great way to sort out how much protein we really need? Let's talk about that. Here's the only quiz question I'm going to give you tonight. I'm not going to call on you. Just come up with your answer in your head. How much of breast milk is protein? Less than 1%, 10, 40, or 80%? Do you have your answer? Are you ready? It's just barely under 1%. Call it 1%. We have the least concentration of protein of all mammals in our breast milk. The least humans do. Here's what breast milk's really made of. Its macronutrient content is energy. It's carbs and fat. Those kids need energy. They're growing like mad. Protein is not what they need compared to carbs and fat. But what about a head-to-head comparison, grams per kilogram per day? That's how we can compare ourselves to infant children, right? So what do they need? On average, that first year, they're consuming about 1.64 grams per kilogram per day. Full disclosure, the first 3 months of life, we have consumption of 2 grams per kilogram per day. But the average over the first year is 1.64. USDA says you and I need 0.8. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they're tripling in size. I'm 210 pounds, and I'm trying to add 5 pounds of muscle mass to me over the next year. That's a 2.5% increase in my weight. And I'll show you how I'm doing it, by the way. I'm doing 3 sets of 10 of these, and 10 of these, and 10 of these. And next year, starting next year, I'm going to do that with weights. Just FYI. So I'm serious. You know I'm serious. We don't need as much protein as everybody's saying. I hear it all the time in my office when I'm looking online. Dr. Atiya's book, we need 1.6, 1.8, 2 grams, 2.2 grams per kilogram per day. None of that makes sense. And I won't bore you tonight with the studies that presume to show that it does. Those studies are flawed. I'm not going to take you down that road, but they are. We're doing just fine. For Christ's sakes, we're at the top of the heap worldwide. It's not protein that we need. We don't have a protein problem in the United States. We have a calorie problem. We need to eat more plants. So, we're not at risk for protein deficiency. What kind of protein should we be eating? Because we all know plant protein's incomplete, right? That's the common understanding. You've got to get your animal protein. Plant protein's incomplete. That's true, except that's totally not true at all. All plant protein is complete. All plant protein has all 20 amino acids. Here's a picture showing animal protein here, and all of this is plant protein, and the amino acids are color-coded. They're all there for all the sources of plant protein you can eat. And you don't need to worry about you better mix and match your plant protein. You're going to be protein deficient, you're going to be leucine deficient, you'll be lysine deficient. That's true, except that's not true at all either. Anybody who takes 60 grams of plant protein from any source will get 100% of the amino acids they need. John McDougall's one of the fathers of the whole food plant-based movement, and he replied, as you see here, to a 2002 American Heart Association editorial saying we have to eat animal protein, not plant protein. It's not true. It's not true at all. So we know we can do just fine eating plant protein, but that begs the question, which kind of protein is better for us, plant or animal protein? Now, look, I just got done telling you that all these studies are flawed, and there are a lot of inherent flaws in epidemiologic studies, observational studies. It's very difficult to sort out the truth. That said, there is just overwhelming evidence that eating plant instead of animal protein reduces your risk for all the major causes of death and disease that we all contend with. Put it another way. Search PubMed, that's a database for medical literature, and look for any study that shows, compared to a whole food plant-based diet, a better outcome with respect to death and disease with any other diet. And you will not find that study. It doesn't exist. Now let's come to the elephant that's in the room. I've been saying we should eat more plants, but I've also been saying that we should do what hunter-gatherers did. Remember that? That's how I started this talk. Let's turn around, look behind us, eat what they ate, and we'll be good to go. Remember when I said that? And I don't know if you noticed, but I glossed over the fact that they ate mostly meat. What about us? Why should we be eating mostly meat? The argument goes like this. Wait a minute, we should eat what hunter-gatherers ate. They were healthy, they ate a lot of meat. We want to be healthy, we should eat a lot of meat. We're just like them. That is so true. We are just like hunter-gatherers. That's a great point. We're not just like them. We're really different from hunter-gatherers, really different in at least two big respects. One is they were more active than we are. We know that. But here's the other one, and I think it's the more important difference between us and hunter-gatherers. Let me get at that difference this way. Remember that time you were at dinner with your spouse, and you said to your spouse, well, I had the steak and potatoes with peas, and for dessert, I'm going to have cheesecake. And your spouse said, gee, honey, where are you going to get your calories? Remember that? No, you don't remember that. Nobody has ever asked that question. There are two reasons she didn't ask that question. One is she knew if she did, the conversation was going to turn south as follows. Now, you were going to say something like, Ellen, you're kind of a smartass, aren't you, sweetie? And she was going to say something like, well, I don't want you turning into a planet like Saturn or Jupiter, sweetie. And now dinner's been ruined. We've all been through that. There are ways to avoid that. As you get older, you understand those ways better. And none of that had to happen. But here's the other reason she didn't say that. We've never been in search of calories. You and I, our whole lives, from the day we were born. We've never been in search of calories. We never had to worry about it. But they did. They did all the time. That was their raison d'etre. That was absolutely their mission in life. They need calories and we don't. We've got them here. We've got them maybe in the car. We've got them on the way home. We've got them at home. We do not need to search for calories. They do. So what? What's that got to do with me? Let's take a look at that. Let's look at 100 grams, the same weight, of 3 different kinds of food. Animal food, that's meat and fish. And 2 kinds of plant food, beans, grains, and starchy vegetables, and fruit and non-starchy vegetables. Let's look at the same weight for those 3 kinds of food, 100 grams, and see how many calories are in each, okay? And let's just see what we see. So for animal food, we'll look at beef, chicken, pork, and fish, okay? And here they are, 100 grams of these foods will show you low to mid 200s for calories. Okay, so far so good? All right, what about starchy vegetables like baked potatoes? Those have got to be loaded with calories, those starchy bad carbs. Lentils, quinoa, and brown rice, what about that? Those are rich in protein, aren't they? Lentils and quinoa. Less than half. Same weight. Well, what about fruit, non-starchy vegetables, blueberries and orange? A lot of sugar there, a lot of calories there. Look out, don't eat too much fruit. No, half again. This is what they were looking for. They were looking for calories. Hunter-gatherers, they need meat. They absolutely need meat. And we don't. I'm not saying meat is bad for us, ladies and gentlemen. That's not my argument tonight. My argument tonight is eat more plants. Next year, I'm going to argue that meat is bad for us. I'm saying we don't need meat. That's all. And I'm saying there's a problem inherent in eating meat. It's the calorie burden that we all find. And as I said earlier, we don't have a protein problem. We've got a calorie problem in the United States. That's what most of us contend with. Okay. So As you'd expect, as protein consumption has increased, this is globally, I'm sorry you can't see that clearly, it's pale blue here. But worldwide protein consumption has increased dramatically over the last 50 years, and over that same period in the United States, just as you would expect, so has our weight. Ladies and gentlemen, this slide is the most important slide to me that I want to show you tonight, because it really shows where health lies for us. Health lies here. Health lies here in this plant food for us. And it's not because meat's inherently bad. I don't argue that at all. It's just that the calories present a problem for us because we live in an abundance of calories and we don't need it. Okay. So easy enough to say, eat a lot of plants and you're good to go. You'll get enough protein, you'll be really healthy, and that's all there is to it. It's so easy, but it's not so easy, is it? Stephen Guyenet wrote a great book, and I'm going to finish my talk with this thought. And he said, here's the real problem. Our midbrains are guiding our decisions before any conscious thought. And he said, what we're really searching for, you and I and hunter-gatherers, no change between us, is sugar and fat. We're searching for it so much that even thinking about sugar or fat gives us a dopamine surge. And when we eat sugar or fat, our satiety response is suppressed, so we can eat more of it. Sound familiar? And if you eat enough of it to gain weight, your body will establish a new set point below which hunger pangs occur. So you'll gain weight. Everything about how we're designed is to search for sugar and fat. Hunter-gatherers, they weren't looking for caribou or buffalo or deer. They were looking for this. They were looking for cheesecake. And they never found it because it didn't exist. But that's what they were looking for. And that's our problem because we know where the cheesecake is. This is the scene of high drama. It's a real battle. And they've got it figured out. Look, they've got these vegetables up here, fruit and vegetables. Just come in the store, come in. Just come in. That's all right, just come in. We're not going to say anything, just come in. Come in the store. They know we'll do the rest. I know where the cheesecake is at York Hannaford. I can get there blindfolded. Where's the arugula? I don't know. I've thought that instead of this welcome sign here, do you see that? I think it would just add to the drama if it said that instead. Heighten the atmosphere when you go in. This guy left without buying anything. He couldn't take the pressure. And I don't blame him. So, ladies and gentlemen, we ought to eat more plants and not worry about getting enough protein. We're okay, we're all getting enough protein. It's so good for us to do that. Go for a walk, it'll save our lives. Next year I'll talk about how it will save our planet too. That's the next thing I'm going to focus on. I've been reading about this stuff for a couple of years, and you know, it can get kind of dry at times, as anything can when you dive into the weeds. And every time that happens, I think about coming here and looking at you and talking with you, and it just motivates me like mad. I just love it. I am so grateful. You were so kind to take time out of your day to come and join me. And that's what this slide says. Yeah, that's what it means. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Really glad to see you. We've got time for questions, but anybody who wants to is free to go. It's not rude, and don't worry about that. You can slip out any time that's convenient for you. And if you'd like to ask any questions or make any comments, what I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead and shout out your question, and then I'm going to repeat it so everybody can hear. Okay? Yeah.
What do you think of those new fat drugs from Novo and Lilly? The new ones?
Yeah, like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy.
I mean,
The GLP-1 agonists that help everyone lose weight. Yeah, the question was, what do I think about the new drugs that are so good at producing weight loss, like Ozempic and Wegovy that we've all heard about? Those are great drugs for people who need them. They just are. And I often say to my patients who I want to convince to be on a statin, I say, let's make it a fair fight, because you know, It is not a fair fight. None of us are going to jog home tonight. We got cars, we got lives to live. We have only so much time in the day. And we can't live as our ancestors did, so sometimes we need help. I think those meds are great. What I also think is doctors like me have done a piss poor job of focusing on how healthy food and exercise can spare us so many of those drugs. If we just take the time to work together and do what we can. There's just immense value in this. So I think they go hand in hand, but in the appropriate circumstances. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What a wonderful performance. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Now then, there is a missing link that I haven't heard you talk about this evening, and I'd love to hear more about it, and that is taste. How can we become attracted to vegetables?
So Leonard's question is, great idea to eat more vegetables, but how about making them taste good? How do you do that? Oh God, that's a great question. My answer is, marry my wife, Heidi Jordan. I don't want to pretend to know anything about this because I don't know anything about this. So many of you in this room, I know from experience, are phenomenal cooks and know so much about food and how to make it appetizing. And I'm a novice at that. I'm finding my way. So, Leonard, it's a great question. And I do think it speaks to that battle that Stephen Guy and I spoke of. We're just constantly, not just tempted, but tormented by the foods that taste really good. You know, who doesn't love cheesecake? And how do you work around that? It's a battle.
Forks Over Knives is a great resource. They have recipes that are, they're gourmet. They're fantastic.
Thank you. Forks Over Knives, she just recommended. And is it, I know that is a documentary, but is it also an online?
Yeah, if you go to Forks Over
Online,
Knives.
Forks and Knives, yeah, thank you.
You can subscribe and they send you emails with recipes.
Great,
So,
great idea. Thank you. Yeah.
When my grandson was 16, he decided he was going on a vegan diet. And I drove him crazy. He wasn't getting enough protein. He was 17, he went into college. Now he wasn't under my jurisdiction. He's on a strict vegan diet. He could have things so much to say he doesn't need all that protein. I was trying to kill him.
I try not to stick up for grandsons against their grandmothers. That's a dangerous place to be. I'm glad he's doing well, though. Yes, sir.
Joe, where does dairy fit in everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of... I'm sorry, thank you. The question was, where does dairy fit into all this? It's a great question. There are two big things I haven't focused on tonight, dairy and grains, because grains really followed hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers ate plants and meat, but they didn't really eat grains. Those came into play about 15,000 years ago, and with it, dairy. There's a lot of conflicting data about dairy, and I think that's largely due to the flaws inherent in those observational studies I talked about. So my stance is to not argue for or against dairy, but just to focus on getting more plants into play. And if you're eating dairy, God bless. I don't want to try to discourage people from doing that. There is one caveat in the reading I've done. I found milk increases risk for Parkinson's disease, and I've found that again and again. That doesn't mean that it does. There's a correlation, and that's just something that I've found enough that's kind of given me pause about that. Otherwise, I think there is fine. Yes.
How do we go about estimating the amount of protein we are consuming?
Oh yeah. How do you know how many grams you're getting? Right? Is that the question? Yeah. The question is, how do you know how many grams of protein you're getting in a day? And I'm not really sure about that, to be honest with you. My thinking about it is don't worry about it, because if you're eating healthy food, and this is what I have found, if you're eating healthy food, that's a big caveat, you will get all the protein you need. It's inevitable. How do you quantify the grams? I guess you could add them up by looking at the ingredients and doing it that way. But I don't think that's necessary. I really don't. Not in our country. Yeah.
So,
we're getting bombarded with advertising. We're talking about drinks with 30 grams of protein per drink.
Yeah.
So what,
Yeah.
so what you've been saying is, that's way, way too much protein a day. A drink like that, is that correct?
Well, I don't think 30 grams of protein is too much a day. I think we ought to get about ballpark 60 grams a day. If you want to get 70 or 80, fine, God bless, good for you. But I do want to point out, there's literature noting that you can't absorb more than about 30 grams of protein at one meal. So, you know, if you've got a 70-gram load of protein in front of you, it's going to be broken down. The keto acid's going to be, the amino acid's going to be kicked out as an amine group, and you'll be left over with the keto acid that is, it's either fat or fuel. Please note, if you eat more protein than you need, you're simply consuming more calories than you need. It's not like you urinate the protein away. You only urinate the nitrogen. That's what goes into urine. But the energy, the carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, that's the rest of the protein molecule, the body uses that either as fuel immediately or it is stored as fat. Eat a lot of protein and you'll get fat, just as if you eat a lot of fat or a lot of carbs. Yeah.
So if you mix one of those drinks with vegetables and whatnot, then you're in pretty good shape on a daily basis. Probably.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of protein supplements just because we don't need them, and what we do need is real whole food. And the more supplements you take, the more you're suppressing your appetite for healthy food. That's my beef with protein supplements, protein powder, things people are putting in to boost their protein intake. There are calories in that protein. So I'm not so fond of that. Joe, I think
it was just as entertaining and better the second time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
A question too.
Yeah, sure.
The sarcopenia slide.
Yeah.
So I don't know if do you have any idea why the outlier on the good side was Europe? Europe was
8%.
7 as opposed to 17 and 17.
Yes, that's a great question. I think those folks are. Thank you. So Joe very observantly noted that on the sarcopenia slide, Northern Europe had a prevalence of, did you say 7%?
Yeah.
7%, which is quite a bit below the 17% elsewhere, as they described it. I don't know, I bet you those people are going for a walk up there in Northern Europe. You know how those they bicycle everywhere, they're always knitting and running around, and, doing that stuff they do in Europe. Right? Isn't that an informed answer? I hope that helps, Joe. Yes.
Mid-70s, your skin starts getting thinner. You need the collagen and all to try to get the only way you're doing that is with supplement, with collagen and peptides in a shake, correct?
No, I don't think you need a supplement to build collagen. And what we're losing as we age, you and I. Oh, sorry, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. Did you say that? Thank you. The question was, as we age, we're losing collagen, and you need supplements to replace that collagen, don't you? Isn't that your question, Victoria? Yeah, and my answer to that is no. I think what we're losing as we age is subcutaneous fat. That's what we're losing, and to the extent we need more collagen, we get that by eating healthy food. We do not, I guess you can tell I'm kind of militant against supplements, except it really, there are instances where people are, they have treatment for cancer and things like that, and they need energy and they need protein and they need supplements. I get that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about generally healthy people who are just going on about their business. I don't think we need supplements.
One other question.
Yeah.
You're saying you eat a lot of fruit and vegetables. The same goes for just throwing it in a blender to be able to blend it up and have it as a shake or something? Or you're saying
Yeah, great question. What about throwing your vegetables into a blender and eating it that way? Is that okay? And my answer to that is, I'm not quite sure. Here's why. If you take, some apples or some oranges and throw them into a blender and then drink it, you're bypassing the first part of digestion, where your salivary amylase gets to start digesting those carbohydrates. That is really important, and you're accelerating the process of digestion, and I'm not sure that has a good effect on us. I think we're designed to eat food in its natural state. Whether that's true for blending vegetables, you got me. That's a really good question. I don't know. Yes?
Yeah, many foreign governments, they tax the bad stuff, the meat and the sugar, and they subsidize vegetables. Are there any ideas why our government doesn't do more of that?
You Democrat, you. I think that's a great idea. She said we should tax sugar till people bleed. That's what she said, and it's a great, great idea. I'm for you. I'm voting for you. Yes. What else? Is that about? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Two questions.
Sure.
One, my wife raised about 10 minutes into your talk when she turned to me and said, Joel should really do a TED Talk. So the question is, are you open to being nominated for a TEDx? That's the first question. Second question, obviously, primitive hominids had a much shorter life expectancy. Why? What was killing, aside from lions and enemies, what was actually killing them?
Yeah, infection, that's what I think. It's a great question.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And what's the
I don't know, honey. I can't. Oh, wait, what's that? That's my daughter calling me on WhatsApp from Europe. I don't know how the hell this stuff works. Oh, God, so. Oh, I'm sorry.
So repeat what
Great,
you said.
great question.
TED Talk.
Yeah.
Can we nominate you for a TEDx?
Well, let's talk about that after, because I don't know. That's a good question. That's kind of you. But I'm sorry, what followed that?
I'm just curious, and you kind of already answered it, but if we have an understanding of why they only lived to 20 years.
Oh, yeah. Great question. Yeah, it's a great question, because, you know, a lot of the thinking about hunter-gatherers is, well, they're not a really good sample for us because they didn't live long enough to get heart disease or cancer. That's actually not true. The Chimene hunter-gatherers in Bolivia lived into their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we were able to study that really carefully with coronary artery calcium scores. And they did a study of 700 of these people, took them on a boat up the river to the hospital, out of the jungle. They were in the Amazon rainforest, that's where they lived. And by the way, did you know if you get pregnant in the Amazon, you can have delivery the next day? That's so convenient. That's not my joke. I wish I wrote it. I've always loved that joke. That's not the point. They studied 700 people to see if they have atherosclerosis. And not 1%, but one person had atherosclerosis that they studied. And the lifespan ranged from, I forget what the high was. It was in the 80s or 90s. But many, many people in their 60s and 70s, definitely living long enough to have evidence of heart disease, whether or not they had a heart attack or a stroke. We could see, did they have it? And they didn't. These people didn't live as long as we do because they didn't have clean water, they didn't have sanitation, they didn't have reliable access to food, they were exposed to the elements, they didn't have antibiotics. There were all kinds of things. Half the people studied in that study I just referenced had chronic parasite infections ongoing while they were being studied. So yeah, we had lots of reasons to get sick. Yeah. What else, folks? Yeah.
I have another question. Fasting, does that have a positive, even if it's 1 day a week, have a positive effect on the body, kind of taking hold of itself?
Oh, fasting? Yeah, great question. Intermittent fasting. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know enough to know it's really good for us. I didn't used to think so, just because I was too stupid. But then I started reading about it, and it's impressive. I don't know more about it than that, Victoria, but intermittent fasting is really healthy.
Well, it works like when you have something like diverticulitis or whatever, and you say stop eating. The minute you stop eating, your body starts repairing everything as long as you stop eating. But if you don't, then it's the same thing. I mean,
Yeah, Victoria's argument is to say that by stopping eating, your body can enter a kind of healing phase. Sounds right to me. I don't know a lot about it, but that sounds good. Are we done here? I don't want to keep you longer than you need to be. One last question in the back.
So for families that have like little kids, what is the protein?
Oh, for little kids? Yeah, so I'm not a pediatrician. The question was, what do little kids need in the way of protein intake? It's a great question. I'm not a pediatrician. I'm an internist. I specifically did not study children on purpose. so I don't know. But I would say, I would just point out this. Remember when I said babies have a certain amount of protein by their breast milk? Guess what happens the day they go off breast milk? Their protein intake skyrockets. Why is that? Because we are giving our kids too much protein. Now, I don't want to say more than that, but that's a fact. Once kids stop taking breast milk, their protein consumption goes up, not down, because we're all laboring under that misapprehension. Folks, thank you so much. Thank you so much.